The desert world of Valon 4 was silent except for the soft howl of wind against broken stone. Long ago it had been a place of war, and even now the scars remained. Blackened craters stretched across the horizon, and shattered towers leaned against each other like wounded giants. No birds sang here, no green life grew, only ruins, ash, and memories of battles no one wanted to remember. Through this lifeless land walked a single human, Elias Ward, a field engineer of the Terran Union. His uniform was dusty, his boots cracked from long travel, and his pack heavy with salvaging tools. He was not a soldier in shining armor, nor a commander with authority. He was just a man who fixed things, wandering where others had fallen. The war between humans and the alien Dominion had ended 6 months ago. Both sides had left behind graveyards of ships and fortresses. Engineers like Elias were sent to recover what little could still be used: data cores, power cells, or even broken scraps that could be melted down. To most, this job was dull, but Elias felt a strange peace here. Among ruins, there was no shouting, no politics, only silence and the hum of machines that once burned with fury. On that particular day, Elias had made his way into a half-collapsed alien structure. The walls were carved with strange geometric lines that glowed faintly when touched by sunlight. The air inside was heavy with dust, and his boots crunched softly against broken glass. He checked his scanner, no major energy readings, but faint spikes of residual power. That meant there might still be something alive here, some shard of technology waiting to be reawakened. As he moved deeper, he noticed something unusual. A trail of disturbed dust across the floor, footprints faint but visible, not human boots, too narrow, too sharp. His chest tightened. Could there still be enemy soldiers here? The war was over, but not every warrior obeyed treaties. Some preferred death to surrender. Elias followed the prints carefully, hand resting near the sidearm on his belt, though he hoped not to use it. The prints led him into a wide chamber where the ceiling had cracked open, letting a shaft of sunlight pour down like a golden spotlight. At first, he thought the room was empty. Then in the corner, he saw her. A figure slumped against the wall, armored chest rising and falling faintly. Her armor was silver blue, marked with the crest of the Valari Dominion, enemies humans had fought for decades. Her helmet was cracked, one side shattered enough for Elias to see pale lavender skin beneath. 2 eyes, faintly glowing with exhaustion, blinked weakly at him. She was an alien girl, though taller than him, her form lean and sharp like a blade. Her long hair, silver with a faint violet shimmer, spilled out from the broken helmet. Her left leg armor was torn, dark blood dried around it. She looked barely alive. Elias froze. The smart thing to do would be to leave. This was an enemy soldier, a warrior who might kill him the moment she recovered. But something in her face stopped him. It was not anger, not hatred. It was fear, and beneath it, desperation. Her voice was weak, but carried the commanding tone of someone who once held pride. "You human?" Elias swallowed hard, but nodded. "Yeah, human. You're Valari." Her lips pressed into a thin line. She tried to push herself up, but her injured leg gave way, and she fell back with a sharp cry. For a moment she trembled, as if torn between lashing out and begging for help. In the end, her exhaustion won. "Kill me then," she whispered bitterly. "Better than dying slow." Elias frowned. He was no executioner. "I'm not here to kill anyone. War's over." Her glowing eyes narrowed suspiciously, scanning him as though trying to read his soul. "War never ends. Not for us." Elias sighed, kneeling down and setting his pack aside. "Maybe, but you're not dying here. Not today." She let out a short laugh, harsh and mocking despite her weakness. "A human thinks he can save me? Foolish." Ignoring her words, Elias pulled out a portable med kit. He carefully reached for her leg wound, but the moment his hand moved near her, her gauntleted arm shot up and grabbed his wrist. Despite her weakness, her grip was like iron. "I need to stop the bleeding," Elias said calmly. "Unless you want to bleed out in this tomb." Her eyes locked onto his. Seconds passed in tense silence. Finally, with a frustrated hiss, she released him. "Do as you will. It changes nothing." Working quickly, Elias cleaned the wound as best as he could and applied a regenerative patch. The med gel hissed faintly as it activated, glowing green against her lavender skin. She winced but did not cry out. Clearly she was a warrior used to pain. When Elias finished, he leaned back. "That should hold for now. You need real treatment, though." She stared at him with disbelief. "Why? Why help an enemy?" "Because you're alive," Elias said simply. and because leaving someone to die doesn't sit right with me." For a long while, she said nothing. Then her eyes flicked to the small generator Elias had set down to power his scanner. It buzzed faintly. Lights dim from overuse. Elias reached for it, trying to stabilize the flow. As he adjusted the wires, the power sputtered. Curious, the alien girl reached out without thinking and touched his hand as he held the wire. In that instant, the generator flared to life. Its lights blazed brighter than before, energy readings spiking off the chart. Elias nearly dropped it from shock. He glanced at her, wide-eyed. "What the? I didn't do anything different." She looked just as stunned, staring at her hand still resting against his. The glow in her eyes pulsed faintly, resonating with the hum of the machine. Slowly, she pulled her hand back. The generator dimmed immediately, power falling to its weak state. Her voice was low, filled with both suspicion and wonder. "Human, why does your power rise when I touch it?" Elias could only shake his head. He had no answer. The silence between them deepened, heavy with new mystery. The ruined chamber was quiet after the strange event. Elias sat frozen, his hand still tingling from where the alien girl's touch had lingered. The small generator before him glowed faintly now, as if it, too, had been startled by the sudden burst of power. He stared at her, unsure if what had just happened was real or some trick of his tired mind. The alien girl looked equally shaken, her glowing eyes fixed on him, sharp and searching, like she was trying to see past his skin and into his very bones. For someone who had spoken with such bitterness moments before, she now looked almost unsettled. She finally broke the silence. "That should not happen. Machines do not change because of a touch." Elias shook his head. "I know, but it did." Her jaw tightened. She glanced at her hand, then back to him. "You are human. Nothing more. And yet—" She trailed off, as if speaking the thought aloud made it too real. Elias set the generator aside and leaned back against the broken wall. "Look, I don't know what that was. Maybe some weird resonance between your energy and the device, or maybe I'm just unlucky enough to get caught in something I don't understand." Her lips curved in a faint scowl. "Unlucky? You think increased power is misfortune?" "Sometimes," Elias said with a half-smile. "Machines aren't supposed to spike like that. Too much energy and they burn out." The alien girl stared at him for a long moment before slowly shaking her head. She seemed torn between mocking his caution and respecting his honesty. Hours passed. The sunlight shifted, falling across the ruined floor in long, fading beams. Elias busied himself repairing a broken drone he had found in the chamber, while the alien girl watched with guarded eyes. She had not given him her name, though he noticed her armor bore markings that might have been personal symbols. Her leg wound was still weak, but she forced herself to sit upright. Watching him work, her curiosity began to overcome her silence. "You are not a soldier," she said suddenly. Elias glanced at her. "No, I fix things. I'm an engineer. Yet you wander ruins alone." Her voice carried disbelief. "Humans are reckless. Maybe," Elias admitted, tightening a wire. "But someone has to pick up the pieces after war." "Better me than someone else," she tilted her head. "Better? Why?" Elias paused, then shrugged. "Because I don't mind the quiet. I don't mind the ruins, and maybe I believe there's something left worth saving even here." Her eyes softened, though only slightly. Strange human. That night, Elias set up a small campfire using a compact heater core. The alien girl sat nearby, her injured leg stretched out, her posture proud despite her weakness. The firelight painted her silver hair with warm colors, making her look less like an enemy warrior and more like a lost traveler. She finally spoke again. "I am Liara." Elias raised a brow. "That your name?" "Yes, of the Velari Dominion. Once a commander of the 7th Wing." Her voice carried pride, though it was shadowed by the bitterness of defeat. "Well, Liara," Elias said, stirring the flames with a metal rod. "I'm Elias Ward, Terran Union engineer. No commander, no soldier, just a man with a toolbox." Liara studied him with faint amusement. "You speak lightly of yourself. Perhaps that is why your kind are dangerous," Elias chuckled. "Dangerous? I thought you considered us weak," her gaze sharpened. "Weak does not mean harmless. Humans endure when others would break. You fight when you should surrender." "It is puzzling," Elias smirked. "Guess we like to prove people wrong." Liara fell silent again, but he could see the gears turning in her mind. The next morning, Elias tried again to stabilize the small generator. It sputtered weakly, struggling to stay active. Liara, curious, moved closer despite her limp. "Let me see," she said. "You know tech?" Elias asked, surprised. "I commanded fleets. I am no builder, but I understand power." She reached out and placed her hand lightly over his as he held the wire. Again, the generator roared to life, brighter and stronger than before. Sparks danced across the floor, and Elias pulled back in alarm. But Liara did not flinch. She watched the glowing machine with wide eyes as if it confirmed something deep inside her. "There it is again," she whispered. Her voice carried awe this time, not doubt. "When I touch you, the power rises." Elias carefully steadied the machine and shut it off before it overloaded. He looked at her, frowning. "This isn't normal." "If it happens again, we could blow something up." Liara smirked faintly, a shadow of pride flickering in her expression. "Perhaps that is the point. Together we are stronger." "Or more dangerous," Elias muttered. But even as he said it, he could not deny what he had seen. Machines responded to her touch when he was near. His tools, his generator, everything seemed to awaken, as though some hidden potential had been unlocked. Later that day, while Elias scavenged deeper into the ruins, Liara followed slowly. Her limp was still bad, but she refused to remain behind. She moved with stubborn dignity, like a warrior refusing to show weakness. They came across another chamber larger than the first. At its center lay a half-buried communication beacon, cracked but still humming faintly with power. Elias's heart quickened. If he could repair it, they could call for rescue. He knelt beside it, pulling tools from his pack. "This is it. If we can fix this, we might get off this rock." Liara eyed the beacon warily. "You think you can repair what even my people abandoned?" "Maybe not alone," Elias admitted. Then he glanced at her. "But maybe with you." Her expression shifted, half skepticism, half intrigue. She knelt beside him, resting her hand on the beacon's surface. It shuddered faintly, lights flickering brighter. Elias stared. "Of course," he murmured. "It reacts to you. To us." Together they worked. Elias reconnected wires and replaced circuits while Liara provided the strange surge of energy when needed. The beacon pulsed brighter each time she touched it, holding steady only when Elias kept his hands nearby. At one point, as their hands brushed while connecting a cable, Liara looked at him sharply. Her voice was low, almost a whisper. "Human, why does your power rise when I touch it?" Elias had no answer. He only knew that without her, he could not make the machine work. As the hours stretched, something began to change between them. Liara no longer spoke with contempt but with curiosity. She asked about human technology, about the way his tools worked, about why he kept pushing forward despite the odds. Elias answered honestly, sometimes with a joke, sometimes with quiet seriousness. In return, she shared fragments of her world, how the Velari valued strength above all else, how they saw other species as stepping stones to dominance. But when she spoke of her people leaving her behind in retreat, her voice hardened with pain. "They abandoned me because I was wounded," she said, staring at the glowing beacon. "To them, weakness is death." Elias looked at her for a long time. "Then they don't understand strength. Because strength isn't about never falling. It's about getting back up." She met his gaze, her sharp eyes softening just a little. By nightfall, the beacon was half repaired. It still needed a stable power core, and Elias's supplies were running low. He sat back, wiping sweat from his forehead. "We'll need to improvise," he muttered. Liara studied him with quiet intensity. "You humans always improvise. That is your strength." "Perhaps—" She hesitated, then placed her hand lightly on his arm. The warmth of her touch spread through him. Not just physical, but deeper, like a current of energy linking them. "Or perhaps it is also mine now." Elias felt the hum of the beacon grow stronger nearby. He exhaled slowly, meeting her gaze. "Then we'd better use it wisely." The ruined chamber fell silent again, but it was no longer the silence of empty stone. It was the silence of two lives beginning to intertwine, of mystery growing deeper and of a bond forming in the unlikeliest of places. The ruins of Velan 4 always felt heavy, as though the air itself remembered the battles fought there. Broken towers leaned against the horizon like weary soldiers who could not stand anymore. In that silence, Elias and Liara worked together on the beacon, piecing together wires and fragments of old circuits. For the first time in many days, Elias felt something like hope. The machine was damaged, but it was responding, flickering with weak pulses of light that grew stronger whenever Liara touched the surface with her hand. Liara herself was changing. She no longer looked at Elias with open suspicion. Though her pride still glimmered in her sharp eyes, she was quieter now, as though the ruins had forced her to reflect. But deep inside she still carried the blood of a warrior. They had just finished adjusting a panel when the sound of crunching stone echoed down the corridor. Both froze. Elias instinctively reached for his sidearm. Liara, though still limping, straightened her back and clenched her fists. Voices followed, guttural and harsh, the tongue of the Ravagers, a splinter faction that scavenged what the great powers left behind. They were neither human nor Velari, but a mix of deserters, raiders, and mercenaries. To them, ruins like this were hunting grounds and survivors were prey. Liara's expression darkened. "They come for blood," Elias whispered. "How many?" She listened closely, ears sharper than his. 5, maybe 6. Elias cursed under his breath. His pistol could handle 1 or 2, but 6 armed scavengers were too many. Liara's hand brushed his shoulder, steady and fierce. "Then we fight together." The scavengers entered the chamber, weapons glinting in the broken sunlight. They were armed with crude rifles and jagged blades, their armor pieced together from scraps of past battles. When they saw Elias and Liara near the glowing beacon, their faces twisted into greedy grins. "Well, well," one of them growled. "A human rat and a crippled Velari. Easy spoils." Elias stood his ground, though his heart pounded. "This place is ours. Leave and no one gets hurt." The scavengers laughed. One spat on the ground. Weak words. "We take what we want." Liara stepped forward, her tall form casting a shadow. Even wounded, her presence radiated command. "Try and you will choke on your arrogance," the leader sneered. Big words from broken prey. He raised his rifle. That was the spark. The first shot rang out, striking the stone near Elias's head. He dove behind a broken pillar, returning fire with his pistol. His aim was steady, but his weapon lacked power. Liara, with no gun in hand, snatched up a piece of metal pipe and charged forward with a warrior's cry. Even with her limp, she moved like a storm, swinging the pipe against the nearest scavenger. Sparks flew as it clashed against a blade, but she was weaker than before, her wound slowing her. A second scavenger aimed at her exposed side, only for Elias to throw a small drone into the line of fire. The drone sparked and exploded, knocking the scavenger back. "Liara," Elias shouted. She turned toward him, her hand brushing against his arm as he passed another tool. At that touch, the weapon in his hand surged. His pistol, once dull, flared with new energy. The shot he fired next tore through the scavenger's armor like it was paper. Elias blinked in disbelief. "Not again." Liara's eyes glowed brighter and her lips curved in a fierce smile. "Yes, again." The battle grew wild. Elias improvised traps with his tools, turning broken machinery into makeshift weapons. Liara fought beside him, her presence amplifying every strike, every blast. A scavenger rushed Elias with a blade. Elias barely raised his pistol, but Liara's hand touched his shoulder at the same instant he fired. The shot became a beam, knocking the attacker across the room. Another tried to flank them. Elias swung his pack open and hurled a half-repaired drone, wires sparking. Liara kicked it forward and the device exploded in a flash, sending the enemy tumbling into the rubble. The scavengers were fierce, but confusion spread among them. The humans' weak weapons suddenly burned with unnatural power. The alien girl they thought crippled fought with unstoppable fury. Together they were not prey, they were predators. Still, the battle took its toll. Liara staggered, her wound reopening. Elias caught her before she fell, firing wildly at another attacker. Their hands met again, and once more his weapon flared. "Human," Liara shouted, her voice fierce despite her pain. "Do not falter. Stand as you always do." Elias clenched his jaw. "I'm not planning on falling today." The last scavenger, realizing the fight was lost, tried to flee. But Liara hurled her pipe across the chamber, striking him squarely in the back. He collapsed with a groan, and silence returned to the ruins. Elias panted heavily, lowering his weapon. His arms trembled from the strain and sweat dripped down his face. He glanced at Liara, who leaned against the wall, clutching her side but still standing tall. "You all right?" he asked. She smirked faintly, though her breathing was uneven. "I am Velari. I endure." Elias half smiled back. "That makes 2 of us." When the danger had passed, Elias guided Liara back to the campfire. He patched her wound again, this time with more care. As he worked, she watched him with an expression that was no longer filled with suspicion. Instead, it carried respect. "You fight like no human I have met," she said softly. "Not with strength, but with will. You turn scraps into weapons, weakness into fire." Elias shrugged. "I just do what I have to. Survival doesn't leave much room for pride." She tilted her head. "And yet, when I touch you, your fire grows." "Why?" Elias hesitated. He truly didn't know. Maybe humans are built to rise when someone believes in them. Maybe it's not just power. Maybe it's connection. Liara was silent for a long time. Then she whispered almost to herself, "Connection." That night the ruins felt different. The beacon still pulsed faintly, but now there was more than just the promise of rescue. There was a bond, a fragile, growing bond between two former enemies. Elias lay awake, staring at the stars through the cracked ceiling. Beside him, Liara rested with her weapon pipe within reach. She had not said it aloud, but he could see it in her eyes. She no longer saw him as weak, and perhaps, Elias thought, he no longer saw her as only an enemy. Tomorrow, the beacon would need more work. Tomorrow, more dangers might come. But tonight, in the stillness of the ruins, Elias felt something he hadn't in a long time. Hope. The ruins of Valen 4 were silent again, save for the soft hum of the half-repaired beacon. Elias and Liara had survived the ambush of the Ravagers, but the battle had left its marks. Elias's uniform was scorched in places, and his hands were blackened with grime. Liara's wound had been patched, but she still moved carefully, favoring her injured leg. Despite their exhaustion, neither wanted to stop. The beacon had only partially activated. To call for rescue, they needed a stable power core, and Elias had an idea. But it required cooperation, trust, and, strangely, Liara's touch. She watched him work, leaning on a cracked pillar. "You humans always look for solutions in chaos," she said quietly. "I do not understand it. We Velari follow plans, precise and strict, yet you improvise. You survive." Elias glanced at her, smiling faintly. "Improvisation is survival. Plans are only as good as the people following them. Sometimes the plan has to bend to the moment." Liara considered this, her glowing eyes reflecting the flickering light of the beacon. "Perhaps that is why your power rises when I touch it," she murmured. "Perhaps humans are not made strong alone. Perhaps," her voice softened, "perhaps strength is meant to be shared." Elias paused. He had felt the power surge every time her hand brushed his, every time they worked together, but he had not thought of it as a bond, more as a strange anomaly. Now hearing her speak the idea aloud, it seemed, "Right. Maybe it is," he said quietly. "Maybe connection makes us stronger than anything else." Liara's expression darkened as her thoughts turned inward. "I did not understand humans. My people, my commanders, they thought you were weak, fragile, unworthy of consideration. We looked at your small numbers, your simple weapons, and assumed you would fail." Elias nodded slowly. "Most do. But humans endure, we adapt. We fight back even when the odds are against us. That's our strength." She let out a bitter laugh. "Strength. My people would call that foolish. To survive by luck and stubbornness is weakness." "Not weakness," Elias corrected firmly. "Resilience. That's different. Resilience is rising again when everything wants you down. It's finding hope when there seems to be none." "That's power." Liara's eyes softened slightly. She watched him as he spoke, listening with the intensity of someone realizing a truth that had eluded her all her life. The next morning, Elias gathered materials to complete the beacon. He scavenged old conduits, wiring, and a few broken circuits from the surrounding ruins. Liara followed him, careful with each step but eager to help. "You know how to repair technology," she said, picking up a corroded wire. "Yet your knowledge is not like ours. We study machines like sacred texts. You touch them and they obey." Elias shrugged, a smile tugging at his lips. "Machines are like people in some ways. You can read manuals, but it doesn't always help. You have to feel them, understand how they respond. Sometimes, you have to improvise." Liara frowned, but her hand brushed against his as they reached for the same circuit. Immediately, the conduit they were holding glowed faintly, humming with energy. Elias's eyes widened. "See? It's like that," he said, amazed again. "Your touch. It amplifies everything I do." Liara's breath caught. "It cannot be natural. This a power. It should not happen." "Maybe it's not natural," Elias admitted. "Maybe it's something we humans don't understand yet. But it works. That's enough for now." Her gaze lingered on him, thoughtful. Perhaps humans are more than their bodies. Perhaps your kind grows stronger not in isolation, but in connection. Touch, trust, cooperation. These are your true strengths. Elias felt a warmth in his chest, something he hadn't expected. Then maybe that's why we survived today. Together. Liara said nothing, but her eyes glimmered with an understanding she had never had before. By midday, they had reached the beacon chamber again. Elias laid out all the tools and parts he had scavenged, preparing to reconnect the circuits and insert the makeshift power core. Liara stood beside him, her hand hovering near his as though aware that the final activation would require both of them. "You know," she said quietly, "I once commanded fleets. My people believed strength alone ruled the universe. They measured victory by numbers, weapons, and dominance. They left behind the weak, abandoned the injured, and praised only those who could crush others." Elias looked at her, listening. He had heard bits of Velari culture before, but hearing it from someone who had lived it brought it into sharp focus. "Sound harsh," he said softly. "It is," she admitted. "And I thought humans were weak. I thought your small bodies, fragile armor, and simple weapons would fail against us. Yet here we are. You endure. You improvise. You survive. You rise even when everything seems lost." Elias felt his hand brush against hers as she leaned over to inspect a connector. Once more the energy surged. The circuits sparked and hummed stronger than before. She looked at him, awe in her glowing eyes. "Human, your power rises when I touch it. But now I see, it is not power alone. It is the will to survive, the courage to try, and the bond between us. Perhaps that is why your kind is stronger than we ever imagined." Elias swallowed, feeling the truth in her words. Maybe that's what humans have always had. Not weapons, not size, not armor, but heart and connection. That's the real strength. Liara's expression softened further. For the first time, she allowed herself to admire humans, not as weak creatures to be dismissed, but as beings capable of greatness. Elias worked to insert the power core. It was old, unstable, and barely functional, but it was all they had. As he secured the last connector, Liara's hand rested on his. Instantly the core hummed to life, the beacon glowing brightly. Light spread across the chamber, reaching a brightness neither could have predicted. Elias stepped back, eyes wide. "It's working. The beacon. It's stable." Liara's eyes glimmered. "It responds to us, to our bond. I have never seen such a phenomenon." They exchanged a quiet look, both understanding that what had happened went beyond machinery. It was more than technology. It was a reflection of something deeper, a connection that amplified their strengths. "You see now," Elias said softly, "why I said it's connection that matters." She nodded, almost in awe. "I see it. Humans are extraordinary. Not in brute force, not in dominance, but in the way you endure and grow stronger when you are not alone." The afternoon passed, and with it came a deeper understanding between them. They shared stories of their pasts. Elias spoke of the Terran Union, of the engineers who repaired the war-torn colonies, of humanity's struggles and triumphs. Liara shared memories of the Velari Dominion, of fleets, battles, and the rigid hierarchy that had once guided her life. The more they spoke, the more Elias understood the Velari mindset, and the more Liara understood humanity's resilience. And in that understanding, a silent respect grew. At last, Elias looked at the beacon, now fully powered. "It's ready," he said. "We just need to send the signal." Liara hesitated. "Before we do, I must tell you something. My people, they do not value life as humans do. They see weakness as shame, survival as luck. If they knew I had worked with a human, if they knew I relied on you, they would call it betrayal." Elias smiled faintly. "Then maybe that's their problem, not ours. We know the truth now. Power is not about fear or dominance. It's about endurance and cooperation. And that we have plenty of." Liara's lips curved in a small, proud smile. For the first time, she spoke softly without pride or anger. "Then let this beacon be a testament, not just of technology, but of our understanding, of humans, of connection." Elias touched her hand briefly. The surge of energy hummed between them again, steady and strong. No longer a strange anomaly, it felt natural, like the world itself recognized their unity. She looked at him, awe and something like admiration in her glowing eyes. "Human. Perhaps your kind was never weak. Perhaps we were blind." Elias nodded. "We're not weak. We just rise when others stand with us. Liara's expression softened further.
Then rise we shall.
Together. The beacon flared once more, sending a signal out into the void, and for the first time in many months, Velan 4 felt less like a world of ruin, and more like a place of possibility. The beacon glowed brightly in the chamber, its lights reflecting off broken walls and scattered debris. Elias and Liara stood side by side, their hands still brushing, connected not only by the machinery but by a newfound understanding. The energy that had once startled them now felt steady, powerful, as if the beacon itself recognized their bond. Outside, the ruins of Velan 4 lay quiet, but that quiet was not the silence of emptiness. It was the calm before a new beginning. The Ravagers had been driven off, the Scavengers no longer a threat, and the beacon hummed with steady life. Their task was nearly complete, but both knew danger could return at any moment. Elias tightened the straps on his pack, glancing at Liara. Once the signal goes out, help will be on its way. We just have to hold until they arrive. Liara nodded, her face serious. Then we fight. Together. Even with her wounded leg, she moved with a grace and strength that spoke of a warrior who refused to yield. Elias felt that same surge he had felt countless times before, every time her hand brushed his. Together they were stronger than either had ever imagined. Hours passed, and the sky outside deepened to a violet dusk. The ruins stretched endlessly, black silhouettes against the fading light. Then, faint in the distance, the first flashes of lights appeared. Human rescue ships responding to the beacon were approaching Velan 4. Elias allowed himself a small smile. Looks like help is finally coming. Liara's glowing eyes followed the lights with careful attention. Your people, they respond fast, Elias shrugged. They do their best. Not always perfect, but they try. The beacon pulsed brighter, and with each pulse, Liara's presence seemed to strengthen it even more. The signal was no longer just a distress call, it was a testament. A proof of human ingenuity, resilience, and the power of connection. Suddenly, the ground shook. Far off in the distance, the returning Ravagers had regrouped and were advancing toward the ruins. They were angry, desperate, and vastly outnumbered by Elias and Liara's hope, but they still intended to take what they could. Elias gritted his teeth. They're not giving up. We'll have to hold them until the ships arrive. Liara's eyes narrowed. Then we will fight. Let them see the strength of humans, and the bond that they cannot understand. Together they moved to a more defensible position, using broken walls and debris as cover. Elias held a blaster rifle he had repaired, and Liara grasped her weapon pipe. But the real strength was not in the tools, they both felt it. Every time their hands touched, every time they worked in unison, the energy flowed stronger, sharper, faster. It was as though the world itself had joined their cause. The first wave of Ravagers arrived, shouting and brandishing crude weapons. Elias fired, careful, aiming to disable rather than kill, while Liara swung her pipe with precision, sending attackers tumbling into rubble. Every time their hands brushed during the fight, Elias's blaster flared brighter, beams slicing through metal and stone that should have been impossible for it to cut. The Ravagers faltered. Their confidence shattered. What is this? One muttered as he stumbled back from a shot that had seemed impossible to come from a human. Liara smirked faintly, her eyes glowing brighter than ever. This is the power of connection. Strength rises not from weapon or body alone, but from unity. Elias felt the same truth. Alone, he was a single engineer. Together with Liara, he was a force that could shape the world. Every shot, every movement, every improvisation was amplified by their bond. Hours stretched on as they fought. The beacon pulsed steadily, sending out continuous signals to the approaching human fleet. The Ravagers, relentless though they were, began to retreat as they realized the humans' advantage was more than physical. It was something they could not measure or attack. Elias ducked behind a fallen pillar, breathing hard. We can't hold them forever, he muttered. Liara leaned beside him, winded but unyielding. We do not need forever. Only until help arrives. Our strength is enough. At that moment, the first rescue ship landed nearby, thrusters stirring dust into the air. Soldiers poured out, armed and ready, and the tide of battle shifted completely. The Ravagers scattered, unable to face a full human response combined with Elias and Liara's amplified efforts. The battle was over. Silence returned, but this time it was a quiet of triumph. Elias lowered his rifle and exhaled deeply, His chest rising and falling with exhaustion, Liara rested her pipe against her shoulder, surveying the aftermath. Broken weapons, toppled bodies, scattered debris, all were evidence of the fight that had taken place. Yet there was no malice in their victory. It was not about domination. It was about survival, cooperation, and rising stronger than the world expected. "You fought well," Elias said, his voice steady but tired. Liara's glowing eyes met his. "No, we fought well, together," he smiled faintly. "Yeah, together." For the first time, Liara allowed herself to relax. Her armor was scratched, her wound still throbbing, but she felt no shame. Instead, she felt awe, for humans, for the bond they had formed, for the unexpected strength that rose when she and Elias acted as one. Once the human fleet had secured the ruins, commanders approached Elias and Liara. They had heard the story from sensors and scouts, how the beacon had been powered beyond normal limits, how one human and one alien had defended the site with unmatched ingenuity. One officer, a tall human woman, shook Elias's hand firmly. "Engineer Ward, we owe you a debt. That beacon saved countless lives, and whoever your partner is..." Liara stepped forward, her proud posture now tinged with humility. She inclined her head. Liara of the Velari Dominion, once a commander of fleets, now a witness to the strength of humanity. The officer raised an eyebrow, impressed. The strength of humanity, indeed. Liara looked at Elias. "Your kind is remarkable, not for what you conquer, but for what you endure and rise to achieve." Elias shrugged, a faint grin appearing. "Guess that's what we've been trying to show the galaxy all along." As the fleet prepared to leave the planet, Elias and Liara stood side by side, looking at the horizon. The ruins of Velon 4 stretched endlessly, a place of old battles, forgotten dreams, and untold stories. Now it also held a story of cooperation, resilience, and unexpected friendship. Liara spoke softly, almost to herself. "I will return to my people and tell them what I have learned. Humans are not weak. They grow stronger when connected. They endure when others would break. They rise because of courage, heart, and trust." Elias glanced at her. "That's right, and the galaxy will know it too." A gentle hum rose from the beacon as it sent its final signal. It was no longer just a call for help, it was a declaration. A human and an alien, united not by force but by mutual respect, had overcome the odds and created something greater than either could have achieved alone. Liara placed her hand on Elias's shoulder once more. The surge of energy flowed between them, steady and bright. "Human, I finally understand. Your power, it rises not because of might alone. It rises because of hope, connection, and will. And now I see, it will never falter." Elias smiled, feeling that same energy flow. "And it won't, not while we stand together." The fleet lifted off, leaving the ruins behind. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in gold and violet. Velon 4, once a graveyard of war, now felt alive, and in the quiet that followed, the story of humanity's flame, its courage, resilience, and unexpected power, glowed brighter than any beacon could. As Elias and Liara looked at the horizon, both knew this was only the beginning. The galaxy was vast, full of unknown dangers and wonders, but together they had proven something eternal, that humans, even small and simple as they seemed, could rise beyond expectations. That strength was not measured in weapons or numbers, but in heart, spirit, and connection. Liara spoke softly, her glowing eyes meeting his. "Human, your power rises when I touch it. But now I know why. It rises because you are not alone." Elias laughed softly, a sound full of relief and wonder. "Then let's make sure we never are." And with that, the two stood side by side, looking toward a future where humans and allies would rise together, stronger than anyone could imagine. The story of the beacon, the ruins, and the unexpected bond between a human and an alien became a symbol, a flame that would burn brightly in the hearts of all who witnessed it. And so, on Velon 4, in a world of ruin and dust, humanity's flame rose, unstoppable, eternal, and full of hope.